campaign promises they make and not get sucked into that culture of Washington. Number two, people said you're just one of 9 at City Hall. What can one person do? I was elected on a losing minority, 2-6, 2 Republicans, 6 Democrats, but we still got the bulk of my fiscal recovery plan through the city council. And so, if you take a look at what Ted Cruz is doing, he's a freshman senator. He's certainly creating a lot of stir. So, I do believe one individual can make a difference. And it's a question of whether you're willing to stand your ground, whether you're laying out common sense ideas, not worrying about political consequence, not worrying about partisan advantage, but just trying to do the right thing, and then trying to get out there and educate the American people. We're getting a good amount of national media already in this race, and I think that that will continue.
Hi, you mentioned you hope that people don't get sucked in when they get elected to the House, but from what my perspective, it seems like with only 2-year terms, and everybody seems to want to get reelected. It seems like they're always running for reelection. If you don't toe the line with your party, it seems like you don't get the good committee meeting, a committee to be on, the office to have. So how do you try to be someone to change things and at the same time get ahead within your party to really make some impact?
You know, I've always said good policy makes for good politics. You know, don't worry about the next election. Just do the right thing, and things will work their way out. Stand your ground, vote your gut, vote your conscience, and don't worry about the short-term pressure, because long-term you will always be in a better position. When I went into city government, I think the argument could be made that the person I ended up taking on the most was Jerry Sanders, a member of my own party. Now, Jerry and I are good friends now, and we've worked together on a number of things, but from the outside, people said, boy, you've taken on your own party, members of your own party. I was the first to call for Dick Murphy to resign, 2004. First to call for his resignation. First to start talking about a recall of Dick Murphy, and ultimately he, 2 weeks later, resigned. You know, I have no problem taking on my own party. I've done it time and time again. I wish that you would see more of that in Washington, because the 2 parties, I think, are out of touch with where the American people are. People are basically disgusted with all of the above, and we need to get back to what's the problem. Let's be honest about the problem, and let's embrace solutions irrespective of who gave them, irrespective of what party label might be associated with them. Yes?
The Tea Party
Not here.
the Tea Party junior congressmen are being blamed for sticking to their guns and being the reason nothing is getting done in this current situation. So how would you assess that? Would you,
Well, I think that
are they doing a service, a disservice?
I guess I would question, who are we talking about? Because when I read the newspapers, it seems as though people are throwing labels around rather than discussing issues and ideas. For example, my opponent has sent out 32 emails, starting even before I got into this race. Every single one of those saying the word extreme and Tea Partier. He hasn't talked about his own ideas for solving problems. He's just called the other side names. And so, you know, I think one of the things that we've got to insist on is stop the name calling. What's your idea to solve the problem? Okay, we know that you're going to call the other side's names. What's your idea to solve the problem? And I don't think you see enough of that in Washington. So I think that a lot of times you see the name calling substituted for reasoned, rational, considerate dialogue on the solutions to the problems. And that's where I'm going to focus on.
So you're not an anarchist?
He's called me so many different things. I mean, hey, you know, you got a pro-choice gay environmentalist running here. I mean, but I'm extreme, as according to Scott Peters. He's basically, I guess, gets to decide who he's going to label and how he's going to label them, irrespective of the truth or actual position. Yeah, go ahead.
It's a big subject, but what is your foreign policy philosophy?
Foreign policy philosophy is read the Constitution, first and foremost. Our Constitution lays out balance of powers, roles and responsibilities for the federal government, limitations on federal power. Second, national security should guide every decision. If it's not in the direct national interest of the U.S., if it does not enhance the American security, then we shouldn't be involved. My heart goes out sometimes for situations around the world. As a human being, you can't help but just be torn when you see suffering in another country, when you see a civil war that's out of control. But our country cannot become the world's police person. We have to judge our foreign policy from the standpoint of how does it secure the United States of America? Because what you're asking us to do is put men and women on the line in harm's way. If you're going to put our men and women on the line in harm's way, if you're asking them to be separated from their family, then there better be a damn good reason why you're doing it. And that's why I believe in a very controlled and accountable and defined role for the federal government when it comes to national security. I would have been against the Syria intervention. I did not see it as a national security threat directly to the U.S. It was a terrible situation. Nobody wanted to see that behavior going on. As human beings, our heart goes out to them. But it does not relate to a direct national security interest. And number two, it didn't seem like there was a plan to win. It looked like it was lose, lose, lose. No matter what we did, there was no upside for the situation. And so when you're looking at use of force, you have to pass the first test, which is it's a direct national security link. And the second test is if you're going to put men and women in harm's way, you better have a thoroughly thought out plan for how you're going to win, how it's going to actually be a successful journey. Yes, go ahead.
Carl, part of foreign policy would be foreign aid, which is at an outrageous level while we're still struggling in our own country. I'd like your views on that.
I do think that we are spending too much on foreign aid, and there's a lot of waste. And that's one of the low-hanging fruit items in the budget that we should prioritize for reform. But you know, when you take a look at our foreign aid, for example, to Israel, Israel has been a long time, generation after generation ally to the United States. I believe having that relationship is important to our national security because it's in a region that has so much instability. Israel does a lot more in that region for intelligence and works with us on the war on terror. So I think that aid helps. But one thing that you may not know about that aid is that the vast majority of it is a loan that Israel is repaying. It's a loan. And the use of those funds to buy equipment manufactured here in the United States, defense equipment, that then is shipped to Israel for their national security as part of our partnership. And so I think that there are some parts of that budget that are working, so don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but there's a tremendous amount of waste in the foreign aid budget, and I think we need to sharpen the pencil and look there for savings. Go ahead.
Carl, thanks for being with us today. So you touched on Syria just a minute ago. I wanted to follow up with a question, and I think the reason why President Obama said that we need to get involved in Syria is because he probably opened his mouth too soon and drew this red line, and now he had, in any event. So now we've got this red line involved with Iran, and they're obtaining a nuclear weapon at what seems to be a very fast pace. What's your view with respect to any involvement that the United States needs to have in preventing that from happening?
Well, I think that we have a policy as a country in all aspects that we want to limit the number of countries that have access to nuclear weapons. At the same time, we have pursued a thoughtful policy with other countries like the Soviet Union to disarm and reduce our nuclear portfolio. That's the right direction to be going in. We are in a different world today than we were in 1945, 1949, 1952. So the policy of standing firm and preventing Iran from using nuclear technology and weaponizing that technology is the right policy, and I would firmly support every reasonable effort to prevent that from happening. I'm intrigued and cautiously optimistic by some of the statements coming from the newly elected president of Iran. There seems to be some inconsistencies there. So I think that the fact that the president is willing to talk is a good thing. I wish if he were willing to talk to the newly elected president of Iran on the issues that divide our countries, that maybe he'd be willing to sit down and negotiate a reasonable budget that reflects our priorities. So let's see if we can encourage that. But at the end of the day, in Iran, the president can only do so much. The Ayatollahs have vast control of that country, and I don't think you've seen a significant shift in philosophy or ideology from them. So I would say our policy should stay the course, that we have to be no nonsense and tough on the nuclear weaponization of Iran. Last questions on the budget, because you know we've solved it. Yeah, go ahead.
Which committee in Congress would be the best match?
Which committee would I request
Yeah,
in
which
Congress?
committee would be the best match for your talents then?
You know, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of which committee do we need for serving San Diego the best? And that committee would be Energy and Commerce. And so in my discussions with leadership, I've said very clearly that that is the only committee I'm going to request, and that's the committee that we need for San Diego. And let me explain why. I believe in working as a delegation, working with Juan Vargas, working with Duncan Hunter, working with Darrell Issa and Susan Davis to represent San Diego as a whole. What's good for San Diego that doesn't have a Democrat or Republican label next to it? What do we do to represent San Diego as a whole? So for example, Juan Vargas got on the Agriculture Committee. That's great. He's the first in decades to get on the Agriculture Committee. Now you might say, well, why in the world would he do that? That's not good for San Diego. And what do we have to do with agriculture? The 5th largest economy in San Diego County, agriculture. Most people are surprised by that. And in fact, life sciences and agriculture usually swap places year to year depending upon economic activity. So him being on agriculture is key for our delegation. So when there are issues with my farmers in San Pasqual Valley, we actually have farmers in the 52nd district, which is great. I've actually represented them on the city council. When we have issues, I have someone I can go to. As a member of the majority, I think I can help Juan get border infrastructure for the border crossing, which is a regional issue for us. A member of the minority probably is not going to be able to do too much in that area. When it comes to armed services, we've got Duncan Hunter and we've got Susan Davis already on armed services. We probably don't need to have additional voices there because they have done an amazing job representing San Diego. And we've got a delegation approach. What did we lose in 2012? We lost an important committee for life sciences, high tech, biotech, solar energy, which are very important job clusters here in San Diego. We lost the Energy and Commerce Committee, which Brian Bilbray served on. Mary Bono Mack from Palm Springs also served on that committee. And as a result of both of them losing their elections in 2012, do you know that California has no representation in the majority on that committee? California, the entire state, no representation in the majority on that committee. And yet you have Silicon Valley, you have high-tech, biotech, solar as so important to our economy. No representation. And so I think that's important for our region, that I get that committee slot and work with that innovation sector to make sure that we have good policy and that we can encourage job creation. Now, people said, well, you're a budget expert. You're all about government reform. Shouldn't you pick the budget committee and government reform and oversight, those two committees that have a lot of jurisdiction? My response to that is, I don't need a committee to be an expert or to have a role in those areas. I'm going to speak my mind, I'm going to lay out ideas in those areas, but I need to look at what can I do to serve San Diego from a regional standpoint with my Democrat and Republican colleagues. What can I do for the economy here? And the Energy and Commerce Committee is critical that we get that back for San Diego. I appreciate your time today, and again, I left you with, I think this is the last time I was here, is, believe. That word is very powerful. Believe that we can get this done. Don't believe the hype of the opposition. We can change the culture of Congress. We can change the budget process to prevent the sort of mess that we just saw last night. That mess is the result of partisan politics. And so what we need to do is we need to reform the process, the budget process itself, to penalize members of Congress when they don't do their job. When you don't pass a budget, and I'm not casting blame on one side or the other, because we've had 17 government shutdowns before this one. So there's a lot of blame on both sides. When it happens, these members of Congress should pay a penalty, and they should forfeit their pay. And that's the heart and soul of the proposal that I laid out yesterday. Thanks so much. I don't take gifts, so I'll give this back to you guys and raffle it off. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Joe. Carl DeMaio, thank you. Just a few notes of importance here. Now, everybody's had a lot to eat. I sincerely apologize for the screw-up. It was beyond our control. Pete tried to back us up and get some pizzas in here. We couldn't do it in less than an hour. So we're just high and dry at the moment. One highlight we have today is one of our members going to give his Who Am I?